live streaming.
Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, depending on the time you're watching this. Let me check YouTube first because I don't trust YouTube, as you can imagine, because it's crap. But anyway, yes, we are connected. My public service announcement of the day, as usual. Let me prepare. Okay. Wear your fucking mask. Okay? Let me repeat. Wear your fucking mask. I don't care if you want to kill yourself. You're an idiot. You're suicidal. Die. You know, like the Romans. Spartacus, you die. The problem is that if you don't wear a mask, masks don't protect you. They protect the other people from you. And you can get somebody else seriously, chronically ill with serious consequences. And even worse, you can kill people. So, and that worries me a lot more. So please, wear your mask. Take care of other people, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your mom, your grandparents, your kids. You can get them killed. So please wear your mask. And as I always say, if you think wearing a mask is stupid and you think you're Superman, you're untouchable and don't care for anybody else's safety and well-being, leave this fucking channel now. I don't want you here. Okay? With that and my fine way of saying things, I'm polite, as you can see, as always. How are you, Eric?
I'm doing all right.
How's things in your neck of the woods? Getting better? Still crazy because you have the fires, you have the COVID, you have the protests, you have everything.
Yeah. Right now, we've got bad air quality because of the fires, so that just kind of crept back in again. So if I start tearing up, it's because the air is getting funky again. But
yeah. You have said because you're a it's because I'm a sensitive guy and I get emotional.
Yeah, that could be that too. That's
is there anything that you miss a lot? You know, like I am your Dr. Frankenstein. Introducing myself. My name is Victor. I'm your doctor. I come with my syringe and I say, everything is fine. We're free. You know, pandemic is over. What's the first thing that you've been, missing for months that you're saying I would do it first thing?
Well, we have literally not gone to a restaurant or even gotten takeout from a restaurant since March. So probably something like that. Like, hey, let's go get some Mexican food. I haven't had a lot. There's like a decent Mexican restaurant that's like a couple blocks from my house, and I'm like, I haven't gone there in forever. And, so there's that. There's all sorts of other restaurants that I love going to. That's like, that's what I miss. I miss going out to restaurants. And,
so it's literally a situation of, where's my taco?
Yeah. Well, in this case, burrito, but yeah.
Okay, but acceptable. Do you remember the last time you went to the theater to watch a movie before this started?
No, I don't remember the last movie I saw.
That I was asking because it's happening to a lot of people, and Howard Shaking was the cleverest one, because when I asked Howard, he told me back, I'm sure you don't remember either, and I literally didn't remember. It's really weird that most everybody has forgotten the movie which last. So even if it was in March or in February, it's like, we moved past we're in the other side of a black hole.
Yeah.
And we have forgotten. It's really weird. So same thing for you. You just don't remember.
Now it's going to be bugging me the whole time. The thing is, I don't go to a lot of movies either. So, I mean, if it was Avengers Endgame, then that wouldn't surprise me.
Mm-hmm.
But, jeez.
It's weird, right?
Jeez,
it's
that's
been
a lot.
So many things in such a small amount of time that I guess that's it. That you just
well, you didn't know there was going to be a test later on, so it's just I thought I could just skate by.
Okay, when you're working, how is it for you? I mean, you need complete silence, or you use music, podcasts in the background? How is it for you? Or it depends on the phase of the work. For example, Olivier Coipel explained to me.
Yeah. It depends on the phase of the work. If I'm penciling, I can definitely have music going on, or listen to podcasts or whatever, listen to comedy, listen to whatever. Just something can be occupying my mind. If I'm scripting, it's dead silence.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything in particular? I mean, for example, Olivia, as I was telling you, tells me that if he's doing an epic scene, he needs to put some kind of soundtrack to put him in the situation. If he's emotional, he will go with classic music. Is there anything like that, or like who was it?
Not even remotely.
Okay.
It just and when this whole pandemic thing was going on, I would go into a coffee shop once a week and just be there with a couple other artists who would go there and hang out, and we'd bullshit and sit there, and I would be drawing comics, and so a girl that was there who's going to school, she would just draw in her sketchbook, and I had another friend who was trying to get his comic book stuff going. Mm-hmm. And it was just like, a good time of people just kind of hanging out and whatever. And we would just listen to whatever music happened to be playing in the coffee shop. Mm-hmm. So, it's like I don't need anything special mm-hmm. for any of this stuff.
Yeah, it's like the other day, Romita Jr. was telling me that he can only work with blues. and I was literally like, blues? That's not the most happy thing to work with. Like, no, I don't know. I just I got used, and I need to work with blues. That's what motivates me.
All right, whatever it takes, man.
Why?
Tell you how to live your life.
But for you, why did you decide of all the options you had, as an artist, as a creator, to do comics? This is what I want to do. You could have gone, with movie storyboarding, you have gone with illustration, but you decided to do comics, obviously. So yeah. What was it for you that made you be so focused and decide this is my future?
Well, I started drawing comics when I was in 4th grade. So I grew up with comic books. My dad had collected comic books when he was a kid. So we grew up with his old Golden Age comic book collection. So he had all this stuff from the 40s and 50s. And that was just always a part of my life, was just these comic books that were just kind of forever there. And we had moved from a decent-sized town up in Washington State down to very rural California. So much so that we bought a piece of land in the middle of the redwoods mm-hmm. and had built our own kind of temporary hippie house while we got our act together to build a real house. Mm-hmm. And during that time, I had, my brother was around. I had 2 younger sisters, but I had nothing really to do. So I started kind of making my own comics kind of whole hog at that point. And I really was just making up my own characters and then having those characters meet established Marvel and DC characters and have his own adventures. And I was just creating like crazy, just as many characters as I could, mostly good guys. My bad guys were all super lame at that point. So I was just populating my comics with as many cool good guys as I could come up with, and then whatever half-assed evil bald guy with an attitude that they would be going up against.
So you were already creating your own crossovers as a kid.
Yeah. I created Savage Dragon in like 4th grade. Mm-hmm. So I mean, it evolved over the years, because when I started off, he was a Batman knockoff, of all things.
Well, everybody tends to be a Batman knockoff.
You think of the way the dragon looks, and imagine instead of that being a fin that's attached to his actual head, that's attached to a mask, and then he's got the little hole where there's the flesh part poking out, and it's just a green mask that he's wearing. And he's running around. He's got his utility belt and this cool car and all that. I mean, there was a lot a lot of Batman-isms that had shown up real early on, and then I kind of pulled in some other characters that I liked. It's like, oh, Captain Kirk, I have to have him be a guy from space too. So part-time, he's driving around in this spaceship, and then I liked Captain Marvel a lot, the Fawcett Captain Marvel. So I had him saying a magic word that could change him from being a cool race car driver into being a superhero.
Mm-hmm.
So, but eventually I had developed a dragon that was William Johnson would turn into the dragon. And then at some point I just decided I'm going to pull these two apart. And then Dragon became his own guy, and William became some other dude, and eventually he kind of wandered out of the book.
Mm-hmm.
But that was kind of the real early days of Dragon.
So that was the beginning, and so I'm guessing that for you, since you created your own characters at such a young age, the impulse of working in your own creations was always there. It wasn't something that, after a while of doing Marvel comics or DC comics, your frame of mind changed. I guess that for you it was always there, right?
Yeah, well, I did want to. I love Marvel comics as a kid, and I wanted to work at Marvel Comics, and that was really my goal. Was I want to work at Marvel Comics. I want to be able to say I did that. I want to be able to contribute to that. And there are certain books that I wanted to do. I never got to do those books, but there were certain books that I was like, oh, if I had a run on the Hulk, that would be awesome. Oh, if I did the Fantastic Four, that would be great. Oh, I'd love to do Thor, and whatever. All the Jack Kirby stuff. I was super into Jack Kirby once I was full on introduced to Jack's work. And so those are the characters I want to do. And of course, I ended up doing runs on the Punisher and Spider-Man. It's like, oh, all right, I'll take it. They're good gigs, and I would be a fool not to take them. But that certainly wasn't what I set out to do. That wasn't the goal.
Yeah, not being able to do Nova the way we wanted back in the day, is that still nag you, or it's just in the past?
It's in the past. I mean, it all becomes what it becomes. I mean, had Marvel said after I was done doing Spider-Man, had they approved Nova as a regular ongoing book, I might very well have not gone on and done this Image Comics thing. Mm-hmm. Just because it was like, but they had said we approve it as a mini series, and it was like, all right, well, if it's a mini-series, that mini-series can wait till I do this mini-series over at this other fly-by-night outfit. And, and then the Image thing just blew up. Mm-hmm. So at that point, it was why wouldn't I do this? It sounds like the best thing in the world.
Mm-hmm. So it was just a natural evolution. You were happy at Marvel, but then the situation evolved. It's not that since the beginning of your work at Marvel, you were thinking sooner or later I'm going to leave and do my own career on.
Well, I did know that at some point I want to do. He was the dragon when I was a kid, so it was at some point I want to do the dragon. Mm-hmm. And when I start doing the dragon, I'm going to do that basically till the end of my career is what I was thinking. And so part of coming to Image Comics and doing it at Image was, do I really want to start the rest of my career now? Because I hadn't been doing comics for other people for very long. Mm-hmm. I broke in when I was 19 and was doing I'm working my way up the food stream for until I was 29 is when Image Comics became a thing. Mm-hmm. So then, it's like, was 10 years enough? How much of that was even on stuff that I thought was that cool? The first few, I was working at really small comic book companies that didn't amount to much. Mm-hmm. But the last 5 or so years of that, I was working on some decent books and having a good time doing it. So,
let's talk about the language, the comics. Do you when you're scripting or preparing the art or doing all the process at the same time? Because being a writer and artist, that I guess that everything is in a complete synergy. What is that you always have in mind first? A structure or emotion?
All of the above, really. There's sort of a point A to point B that you come into it knowing that you need to hit, and then there's whatever character dynamics, you just kind of come into it going, well, I know I got to do this, and this. So you have kind of a checklist of things you need to accomplish in any one issue. But my process is really, I just start drawing, and there's no written plot, there's no written script, there's no notes of any kind. I just start doing my comic. So like right now I'm on page 3 of a comic I'm working on, and it's like, what's going to be on page 4? My brain is just sitting there going, let me think about that for a minute, because it's not nailed down yet until I'm actually drawing the page, and then it's like, okay, this is going to be a 2-page sequence or 1-page sequence or whatever it is, and then take it from there.
So you create on the fly, basically,
but also very much with things in mind. So I'm not sitting there going, I have no idea what to do. I've drawn the cover usually months ahead of time, so there's at least a basic jumping off point. It's like, okay, there's Malcolm getting the crap kicked out of him by somebody.
Yeah.
What am I doing here?
I've seen this. There's more, but basically 2 kinds of creators in terms of creation. Sorry for repeating. Which is, some of them tell me what is important for them is the destination, and some of them, the most important for them is the journey. You sound like for you is the journey is the most important thing, because your creation tells me that.
There's always stuff in the back of your head where you're going, I know I want to get to this one thing eventually, but you're not sitting there going, how do I do that? I need to do that. I need to get on this today, especially when you're doing an ongoing book. I think if you're doing a mini series, the end game is much more important, because you're sitting there going, I need to stick the landing. I need to have this, end in this big, powerful way. On an ongoing book, it's not that at all. So it's a very, very different kind of thing that you have to deal with, because I'm sitting there going, I'm building the climaxes, and then it's like, and then what happened? And then what happened? It's like, it almost feels like you're telling a joke. You get to the punchline, and it's like, now this has to lead to something else. It's like, oh, crap, what am I doing? I thought and whenever I do get to a thing that feels like an ending, you just know, yeah, but it's not the ending. This keeps going. And as much as you might want to go, and now, this is my new life from now on, it's like, no, it's not. Because the next issue's going to show up, and then you're going to have to deal with that.
Do your characters ever, especially Dragon, after all these years, argue back at you? Like, no, this is not right. This is not who I am. This is not what I could do. You're going in the wrong direction. Stop, rethink. Or that it doesn't happen. You're so in control after all these years of them.
In control. I'm not hearing voices.
No, I'm not saying hearing voices. Some guys, I won't name names, tell me they hear voices in their heads, and they tell the voices argue back, blah, blah, blah. But I wasn't meaning that. I was literally saying sometimes it's just that you feel while you're doing it. It's not working out, if you wanna call it that way.
There are certainly times where I've drawn pages where I think the story doesn't work, and so I'll redo stuff. God, there was actually I drew a. I haven't done this in a long time, but I penciled and inked a page for the previous issue that I got completely done with. Like it's absolutely done. You know, it's the ink's completely done. I've erased it and everything. And then I got to the point where I'm like, it's like that doesn't usually happen at all.
Mm-hmm.
I've also had cases where I've patched in panels or something like that, where something didn't work, or I didn't pick the shot that I thought was effective. But for the most part, that doesn't go on a lot.
Mm-hmm. How important is to be for you to be a storyteller? And that goes back to my question before about picking illustration or storyboarding on any other kind of art, and picking comics as your first love. It's because you like to tell stories first.
Sure. However that may be, and that's been my never-ending war with writers that I worked with over the years. It's just because, no, this is better storytelling. You got to do this instead. And I'm going, no, my master plan.
Sometimes I say, sorry to interrupt, that I keep telling it to artists, and artists agree, and many writers also agree, that sometimes it's too obvious to see that a writer doesn't care who the artist is. They don't write for the artist. There's no synergy. It's just you're there.
Yeah.
Draw. And I keep saying,
I almost
people to think about your artist and to give him what he likes to draw.
Well,
or to challenge him if you want.
Most writers that I've worked with at least gave some token, toss me a bone. What do you some of them did. I asked, what do you like to draw? I mean, some it's like, hey, do you have any ideas? It's like, dude, come on, it's your book. But David Michelini knew, I guess, that I liked Nova. So at one point he was going to stick Nova in there. But I'd quit the book before that happened, so that didn't work out so well. And there's different things, but I mean, he was giving me notes like, don't make Venom so monstrous. People empathize with him being a human being behind the mask. I was just like, no, he's a cool monster. I'm doing what I want. And I don't know if I made any friends that way.
And history has proven you right, to be honest, because what people want to see with Venom is the fucking cool monster. That's it. But I was going on about storytelling, because in many cases with artists, it's about the cool pose or the cool splash, etc., etc. But in your case, for me at least, it's very obvious that you care about telling the story first. You can use the splash, and at any given time, of course, if the story calls for you. But I've never seen you as a guy who could put spectacularity above telling the story. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say that's pretty accurate. I mean, it's telling the story and telling it well comes first. I try as best I can to use the medium to its strengths. I think there are things that comics can do well, and I try to lean into those sorts of things. I do get somewhat frustrated with some people who want to try and treat comic books as though they're film in some way. It's like we're a terrible film if we're doing film, But there's all this stuff that we can do in comics that film can't do.
Yeah.
So we should be doing a lot of that stuff, because I mean, having there be an omnipresent narrator telling you stuff in a movie seems really weird.
Mm-hmm.
In a comic book, it doesn't. Having there be inner monologues and thoughts in a movie seem really, weird. If you've got a character who's suddenly talking to himself to inform the viewer, he seems psychotic. It's like people
So you agree with me that
I'm lying to her right now. It's like that's you can't do that. You've got to make it really obvious that you're lying, so that the viewer is sitting there going, "Why is he grinning at me like that?"
So let me ask you this. Then I guess you agree with me that the best Blade Runner version is the one without the voiceover.
What was that? I missed that.
Blade Runner. I guess you agree with me that the best version of Blade Runner is the one without the voiceover.
I've only seen the one with it, so I don't have.
You haven't watched the director's cut with
I've only seen the regular.
Because it changes that and the happy ending.
Okay.
Remember the elevator? It ends in the elevator. You don't have the sunny skies and then going out and all that. He changed that. He took the voiceover and took out the happy ending.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, well, I don't know if we discussed exactly that. But anyway,
I'll see it at some point. I'm always, if I'm watching something, it's usually not revisiting something that I've seen before. Usually, it's like, all right, I'm going to see something that I haven't seen, and check that out. So
you haven't watched because I've seen a lot of people also telling me that to be on a safe mental spot, to say it in a way, during the pandemic, they've watched a lot of stuff again, watching these movies, watching TV shows that they already watched to feel safe. Not your case, I can see.
Not at all. Not even any. And also when I'm watching stuff, I'm watching it with my wife and sometimes with my son, who's at our house right now. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he is taking college classes from home, so that's fun.
Yes. If we had our kid, 6-year-old, having classes home, my wife working there because, of course, you have to work from home and all that. And it wasn't fun. Let me be honest. So I can't imagine a college kid. It's gotta be difficult. Yes.
It's a whole different thing,
Mm-hmm. And what are what TV shows are you watching now, if any?
Right now we are working our way through Orphan Black, which I'm quite enjoying. So that's it. I mean, usually it's like my wife will pick something, or I'll pick something, or my son Joe will pick something, and we'll just usually find some series and just kind of truck our way through that. But that's been the pandemic thing. Prior to the pandemic, before that was going on, I didn't watch that much at all. I would maybe see a movie on the weekend, and we would always be out and about. Like every weekend, we'd be like, "Oh, we're going hiking here, we're going hiking there," and we'd be all over the place. We'd be visiting other places over the weekend and doing other things over the weekend. So if we had time to squeeze in a movie, that'd be one thing. But now, with the pandemic being what it is, every day is a work day. And since the pandemic, it's like every day is movie day. So every day it's like, okay, work stops at this hour and we're watching some kind of show every night. So it's like, all right, that's the way we're going to do things. That's fine.
What are you liking Orphan Black, by the way?
Yeah. I'm liking it. It's pretty.
I loved it, and I think she's an amazing choice to play Jennifer Walters and She-Hulk.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see how that goes. It's certainly not the face that I would think of, but certainly versatile enough to be able to play several different, different personality types. It's like, all right. You can pull that off. I'm not worried.
Yeah, I think so. Afterwards, that's when people says I don't know her. Like, just watch a couple episodes of Orphan Black, what she does, and then you understand why they pick her because of the personalities and all that. I guess.
Yeah. It's like, holy crap, she's done a remarkable job of just being able to come off as, not only come off as other people, but come off as other people pretending to be one of the other characters she's pretending to be and not being able to pull it off. And it's like, oh, Holy crap!
Yeah, amazing. See her in the Emmy. See her in the Emmy. That's true. She deserved it. Uh, we're, we're talking about you said before about when people tries to do movies in comics, to tell a movie in comics. That it's painfully obvious, and it's horrible because it's just obvious that they're trying to do that. But also, what for you? What makes the comics language so unique? And or said another way, do you think there's any limits to the comics language?
Well, there's obvious ones. We don't have sound. Sound is at best a graphic in our work. So but we don't have actual sound. We don't have actual movement. So just simple things like somebody shaking their head and saying no, no, no. It's like you can't draw somebody shaking their head. So it's like that's a subtle thing that you can do in a movie, and showing real subtle differences in different kinds of emotional things can be difficult in comics. And you're spoiled when you turn the page. You're seeing events that take place ahead of the events that you want your reader to see.
Mm-hmm.
So that you don't get that in movies. You don't get that in a book. But in comics, it's like if the Red Skull is on the bottom right-hand corner, you're going to see the Red Skull because he's red. That's going to attract. Whoa, what's over here? And so you have to, use those page turns to your advantage. It's like, all right, so surprises can be on the left-hand page, panel 1, and cliffhangers can be on right-hand page, last panel. And you start using that format to your advantage. And even if you're working for corporate companies, you can kind of control things a little bit by going, all right, well, this is going to be a double page spread, so these pages are going to be next to one another, and then I know that the page after that is going to be attached, and that it's going to be on its own somehow. So there's a little bit. Unfortunately, you can't control it completely, and they can toss in a single ad that throws everything off by a page, and the rest of your book is a mess.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. One of the advantages of many advantages, of course, of moving to image was in part that, to get rid of the fucking ad that they could put in the middle and mess with your pace, right?
Yeah. That was the constant war. And you would just think that editorial up at these companies would know this needs to be a left-hand page, this needs to be a right-hand page. But just flipping through the comics, it seems like a lot of the pacing is thrown off because of ad placement. And then when they go to do the trade paperbacks, artists will be putting double page spreads kind of indiscriminately, and then they have to put these weird bridging pages that are just single pages of some graphic that's in the middle of a story, just so that the double page spreads will land in the right space. Mm-hmm. So that can be somewhat disruptive and weird. But yeah, it's great to be able to control that aspect of it. Mm-hmm. But we can you can control page design, which is something that while you can do that in a screen of a movie, it's weird in a screen of a movie to be able to have there be the panel be suddenly skinny and vertical. You can't really do a vertical shot other than having somebody like look through a doorway, and it's like this is the only area of action is through this doorway. The screen is the same size all the time. Mm-hmm. Whereas in comics, it's like I can change this around as much as I want. I can have characters come out of the side of a panel and into the next. I can play around with the form and having there be different aspects of things, where characters are hearing things from other panels. I can have voices overlap. I can have sound effects be a real graphic that I can play with. Have titles be something, the characters can be standing on or interacting with. There's just a number of things that you can play with as an artist to be able to control how fast a reader reads something and different things like that. Whereas in movies, the director is 100% in control all the time. We don't get that. If somebody decides they're going to fire through a book at as quick as they can, there's no slowing them down. There's not much we can do about that. If there's a silent sequence in a movie, that silent sequence is going to take as long as the director takes. He can do a half-hour silent sequence where it's I'm a guy, I'm on an island, I'm not talking with anybody, I'm just going through my paces and doing whatever I have to do to survive. And we as the viewer are sitting there, we're stuck. We got that. If you do a silent issue of a comic book, somebody can fire through there and go like, oh, that thing took me 3 seconds to read. Like, yes, because there were no words and you decided not to look at the pictures.
But that's also sometimes I think modern comics in general, but some modern comics are missing, and I keep talking to creators about it, and they keep telling me it's a matter of the monthly grind and what you have to sell in 20 pages, and I keep repeating we're missing the importance of silence in comics, or those nuances of that time to reflect. That in many cases, in superhero comics especially, you don't have a silent second, a silent moment, a silent panel. Everything is worthy, and sometimes you're like, I need to breathe. I need a second to reflect, to see the character absorb things. What do you think about that?
Well, I'm torn, because there are times when they do that, and then you feel like it just feels like you're padding a story out because you want it to fit a trade paperback too.
Okay.
Because there are these stories where you go, you're doing this over 6 issues, and in an old comic book of back in the day. There we go. I'm on a big street.
It's fine. Don't worry about it.
But in the old comics back in the day, you couldn't do a 6-part story. You would just be, look, each of these chapters has to be able to stand on its own. It's got to be a viable chunk in and of its own. All these things are going to wind up being scattered to the wind. At some point, somebody's going to be reading this issue of Green Lantern in a barber shop while he's waiting to get his hair cut, and it's got to make some sense. Things are sold as individual comics. They need to be comprehensible as individual comics. But a lot of writers at this point are just going, this is going to be a trade, so I'm just going to play this out and have it take whatever space it's going to take and stuff like that.
Yeah, John Bogdanov was telling me one of the days, the day he was here, that he misses the art of the complete comic. Of just middle, beginning, and end, telling a whole story. And of course, he mentioned Stan and Jack. Like, they did that every fucking month. It's like, bam, bam, bam. And that's what readers wanted. And a longer story. But
that's what I try to do in my book, is be like, look, every issue is going to be a complete chunk of something. There may be aspects to it that are touched back on in subsequent issues, but at least, as an individual comic, it's going to make some sense. And part of that is just that I've set the book in real time, and characters are aging as things go on. So to have a 6-part story is kind of a mess in a way, unless you're building in time gaps where people are frozen or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
At some point you go, I've got to catch up. I've had a bunch of issues that continued one into the next, but now it's November and my book is still in April.
Mm-hmm.
So what the hell? I gotta do something up here. How am I going to cover a lot of ground?
Mm-hmm.
And those kind of issues can be weird too. And I've done that where I've suddenly been like, I'm way the hell behind. I got to get caught up.
Mm-hmm. You were talking before about the language. I keep making the same Joe no joke. I say Joe no joke because people know I repeat it and they take it as a joke already. I keep saying that comics are the only art who can defy the theory of relativity.
Mm-hmm.
Because you guys control time and space in a way that is not possible in any other art. As you were saying before, we're talking about movies. The movie's just going. It's just like that. A novel just goes. But with comics, you can, because of the shape of the panels, because of your decision as a writer, say, my story is going to take place, 20 pages are going to happen at the same second or the same minute, or I can jump back and forth, or I can manipulate the reader with the shape of the panels to read slower or faster. Do you think that's accurate, or do you think that's common in any other language too?
Well, there's always the fast forward button.
That's also true.
Let's watch this at twice speed. What I think comics does is it makes the reader a participant in the storytelling.
Yeah.
Because they decide how fast things are going to be told and how slow they're going to be told. It was interesting to watch Frank Miller's The Spirit, because that seemed like somebody reading me a Frank Miller comic really slowly. I was like, this isn't the pace that I think of when I'm thinking of a Frank Miller comic. It's like you're taking this time to show me this cool composed shot of the spirit doing something, and you're lingering on that moment. But I'm not used to that. I'm used to, when I'm reading a Frank Miller comic, it seems like bam, 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 things are happening, and this is going on, and it's a breakneck speed. And it was weird to just be like, no, faster, faster. I want to get to the next stuff. And it seemed off because of that. For what it's worth, I thought it had its moments, and I think it was a well composed. The cinematography I thought was really nice in it. There were some really well composed shots. You can pull out individual shots and go, oh, that's gorgeous. But I think there was also some pretty funky stuff.
Well, maybe when I watch it, I have never watched it again, to be honest. When I watched it, I thought that the biggest mistake Frank did was to try to channel Eisner when doing the movie instead of just being himself. This is not the way you tell stories, Frank. The way you tell stories is just breakneck pacing, bomb, the hammer on the table every 5 seconds. So it seemed like he was trying to be somebody else.
But Will Eisner never showed the Octopus either.
That's true.
And so to actually show him, I thought was a mistake. It's like, look, this is a guy who we always saw from the back of his head. We'd see his hands. And we would never get the reveal of what he actually looked like. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't it have been cooler had you continued with that and actually pulled that off? But that's not how that worked.
Yeah, that's like when they show in the James Bond movies. I always said they should have never shown the face of the leader of Spectra. Just the hand and the cat.
Yeah.
When they saw his face and all that, like, yeah, I would have preferred to never know who he was, or think that he could be a different guy in every movie, because they fucking kill the leader of the Spectra every time Bond wins. So they have another one with a cat, and we never know who he is.
Well, there's all sorts of things. Like, I mean, they should never show Doctor Doom's face without his mask on. He's much more interesting if we don't see his face.
Yeah.
Same thing, I mean, various other characters over time. It's like, we don't need to see Charlie from Charlie's Angels.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I feel the same way about Magneto. Magneto, whatever you pronounce it. Like, the moment he takes the helmet off, I'm not interested.
Yeah.
But anyway, we were talking about the. I love what you just mentioned, because that's what's going to be the second part of my question is, however you want to manipulate the reader in comics, with the pacing, with the panel shape, blah blah blah. By the end of the day, it's also the art that is more interactive, because we depend on how fast he wants to move, or if we get him involved, because whatever you want to do with the pace, if he's not really into it, he's not going to follow the pace you put in there. He's just going to do, or he's going to do like, you know what? Go, oh.
Yeah. Well, there's things we can do that you can't do in a movie, like an off-panel voice. If you got somebody who's speaking out of the frame and all you're seeing is their word balloon, we don't know if that's a man talking or a woman talking or who that is.
Yeah.
It's not until we turn the page and we get the reveal of, oh, that's this person. You can't do that in a movie.
Absolutely.
You hear that voice. As soon as you hear it, you're going, oh, that's a man, or that's a woman, or I recognize that voice.
I recognize that voice, yeah. That's the main thing.
In a comic book, unless it's like they've got some funky font, where it's like, oh, that's clearly the Vision. Look at that. A voice is just an off-panel voice, and you're like, this could be anything. One of few little devices we have where we can manipulate the reader in a way.
Yeah. Also, I was talking to Scott McCloud in here, and of course, he's a formalist and a theorist and all that. But by the end of our 3-hour conversation, because it was 3 hours with Scott, you just let him talk, and like, go. He can be theorizing for like forever, and the conclusion we got to is that with comics, one of the things that we love that we don't see in any other arts is that the next generation is going to the limit that we thought comics had. They're going to break it always. Each generation that comes finds new ways to do comics in terms of formats, in terms of whatever you can think of. And this is a part that I love, that I think no other art can give us. What do you think is the next? Well, if you knew, you would be already doing it, of course. But what do you think that we are going to see in comics next, be it in paper or an evolution to digital or however other thing? What do you think that's next for us?
I have no idea what goes on. I mean, I'm constantly trying new things out just to play around with a form and do different things with it. I would like to see more experimentation and more people trying different things out, just to see what you can do. I mean, I did an issue a while back where every panel took place on a different day. Okay, so it's like you started off with page 1 of characters standing over a graveyard talking about whatever, and then page 2, just that the panels are wildly different from each other, and they're wearing different shirts. They're involved in different things. They're talking to different people. So at least you're getting a sense of, well, there's some kind of a time jump between these two.
Yeah.
And after a few pages, it kind of became obvious that either my storytelling was really jerky and I couldn't keep at all consistent, or something's going on here. And yeah, it was kind of fun to be able to do a story that way, of just having there be a bunch of different things. And it's like one panel he'd be in the middle of a fist fight, the next panel he'd be sitting in a restaurant ordering from a menu, and the next panel he'd be out in the snow playing with his kids, and the next panel he'd be, so you have to constantly be thinking location and in terms of what characters are wearing and things like that. And I'd like to see more of that. I'd like to see more thoughtfulness on the part of creators. I can think of an Alan Moore story of that took place in a house where there's 3 different tiers on the page, and it's like the top row of panels is what's taking place upstairs, and the middle row is what's taking place on the ground level, and the bottom one is what's going on in the basement. And it's like, that's something we can do in comics. You can't really duplicate that in a movie, having there be stuff like that. And they tried to do panels in the first Hulk movie, and it just became this distracting mess of you can't have shit moving around in all 6 places at the same time. That doesn't work. You need to go panel 1, 2, 3, 4. It's got to be a sequence, or it's just you don't know what you're supposed to be focusing on. But I would like to see more of people just looking at the format and going, oh, we can do this. I would also like to see more creators looking back and examining the tools that we have and using those tools a little more effectively. What seems to have happened is with the advent of Dark Knight Returns was a seminal book, which really changed the way comics have been. And so was Watchmen, is that it really changed the way comics have been. And something that happened with both of those books is they lost a narrator, and they lost thought balloons. So there weren't any thought balloons. And in some books, they go as far as to not even have there be sound effects. And it's like, those are all cool tools that we have that I would like to see more people use, because there's, you can describe that it's humid in a narration box. You can describe, something about, hey, there's loud music that's blaring, and it's humid, and it's smelly, and there's all this stuff. You can just pile that into a narration box and you get the idea immediately. But to have characters go, hey, what's that smell? And could you turn the music down? It can get a little cumbersome in terms of dialogue to try and inform readers as to all this stuff that's going on. So we have this thing. You can do a narrator. And, from a panel that transitions from one thing to another, just to be able to have this simple narration of later is so much clearer and more effective in a lot of ways than trying to set up something to say that it's later without saying that it's later. Absolutely. To have a character think with a thought balloon. They're saying I love you, and they're thinking I hate you. You can. That's a very simple thing that you can do in a panel that is really tough to communicate without a thought balloon.
Yeah, sometimes I think I see for me it's absurd, to be honest, when I see that since they don't want to use thought balloons, but they want to have 3 people thinking on the same panel to say something, they color the captions.
Yeah,
blue, red, and green. And I'm like thinking, oh, that's so I know who is thinking that. Why don't I have a thought balloon? And I don't need that. And it's going to be a lot more direct.
Yeah. And you know exactly who's thinking it. But people are sitting there going, oh, it's too comic booky.
Well, it's a comic book.
And it's like, well, it is a comic book. And, and then at the same time, you've got people going, oh, we want to do mixed case word balloons because, all uppercase is so comic book looking. It just looks like a comic book. I read my New York Times and it's all upper and lower case? How come we can't have mixed case in all these balloons? It's like, well, the problem is when you've got mixed case lettering, you've got ascenders and you've got descenders, and suddenly, you know, these letters are bumping into each other because they're different heights. You've got all this weird wasted dead space. There's a lot more white space in every balloon in order to accommodate the mixed case lettering. And it's just ugly.
Yeah.
You know, it's just not aesthetically pleasing to see mixed case lettering in a comic.
Well, there's a reason why Marvel did the Ultimate line, you know, with the uppercase, lowercase, and then they abandoned it. Even themselves are like, you know what? Let's just stop doing this because it doesn't work.
It doesn't work. I mean, that was you know, I think the guy in charge at the time was
Bill Gemas.
He sort of done that across the board. But it's like, this doesn't work, man. It just doesn't. It doesn't look good. It's not pretty.
And the capital letters in lettering in comics are also part of the language, right? You know, it's like your tools. Why are you going to abandon the basic tools you have?
Mm-hmm.
Because we don't have many tools. Let's use the ones we have.
Yeah. We got all sorts of the things we have. We can do all this stuff with graphics in terms of lettering and you know, sound effects that take up a certain amount of space and have a certain footprint, and you know, there is stuff that we can do, and just to abandon all that stuff in favor of what? You know, you're just imposing the limitations of another medium on comics, and comics already has all these limitations to begin with.
Yeah,
you know, it's like people deciding that costumes need to have all these seams in it and all these wrinkles and all this nonsense, and it's like, look, man. The movie should be trying to catch up with us. We can do this. We can draw a naked guy and just put a couple lines on him and he's got a costume. They can't do that. Their movies look terrible when they do that. Let them scramble to make theirs look as cool as ours. We're going to make our comics look as cool as superhumanly possible.
And direct in a way, right? You want to punch the reader. You want him to react fast, you know, to the symbol icon, to the icon, you know, the icon, the iconic look of the character. If you go to too many wrinkles, too many details, that kills in a way the immediacy of it, right?
Well, I think also is at a certain point it stops looking like a superhero and it starts looking like cosplay, or it starts looking like, hey, here's my dad wearing a costume. It's like, well, that's your dad may be a nice guy, but that's not cool. You know, he looks dumb. That's not a superhero anymore. Mm-hmm. You've just taken what was super heroic and you've made it seem ordinary.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, this was bigger than life, and now it's just life, and that doesn't interest me so much.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people will go, yeah, but that she can't possibly wear that costume. It would fall off. And it's like, no, it doesn't, because it's a drawing. and I control whether it falls off or whether it stays on. Mm-hmm. And in my case, it does fall off. But, you know, in other comics, it stays on.
Have you ever thought about colors as sounds?
I don't understand the question.
In many cases, many color artists and also myself in a way, it's called synesthesia. When you put the colors on the page, you're thinking about them as a sound effect too. Mm-hmm. That they a big red can sound like a different way. Blue can. Have you ever thought that way, or for you, colors are just another tool to use in a different way?
I don't. I mean, I choose all the colors for all the sound effects that are in Savage Dragon because I'm the last guy in line. So when the lettering is coming through from the letterer, it's coming in black and white, and then I'm getting the pages from the colorist, and that's all in color, but he doesn't have any of the sound effects on there. So my last day on every book is marrying the lettering to the colored pages. So I'm coming in there, and that's where it suddenly it looks like a comic book in one day. And it's like, oh, this was just pencils and inks, and it was all the various pieces. But then suddenly the last day, it's like, bam, it's a comic book. It's like, oh, cool. And at that point, I'm sending it out to a group of people to proofread and look over it and stuff like that. So that's the last part of the stage. But I'm definitely sitting there thinking, okay, well, what color should the sound effect be? And what else? Most often, I've got other colors on the page that I need to be responding to. So if I wanted a sound effect, it would be like, oh, it'd be cool to have a big red sound effect, but everything else in the panel is red. Suddenly it's like, all right, well, red is off limits because it's not going to stand out amidst all this stuff. So most of the time I'm playing with that. But like a lot of the time when I'm doing, any kind of electrical stuff, I'm almost always using blue for the sound effect.
Is on.
What I was asking the colors that, with talking to colorists, they talk a lot about the storytelling importance of coloring, as a really important tool, not only the sound effects. That's what I was asking about too. How important do you think the colors are for the storytelling or for the final comic, as you were saying?
Oh, quite a bit, and that's why there ends up being a lot of communication between myself and the colorist when working on the book. Especially if there gets to be new characters and stuff like that, of which there are a lot. Very often I will send through a guide like, okay, this new character, he's going to look like, in his first panel, I'll just take that JPEG and plop some colors in there so I can say, okay, he's going to look like this. Because especially with new stuff, it's like they need to know going into it, like, okay, what's going on? And when I don't care, then I don't care, because there's characters like that too, where it's just like, I got 6 new guys who are running around in this comic, so whatever. I don't care. Do what you want to do, man.
Okay. Let's go with people here, so they don't think we're ignoring them. Tito James, hello Tito. Question for Eric: what needs to be improved in creator-owned comics, and what would he like to see from the next generation of creators? Well, second part you already answered it.
What needs to improve? What I would like to see more than anything is people coming into this with the thought that come hell or high water, they're going to finish their story. That's the thing that bothers me more than anything, is people suddenly going, all right, I'm done. It's like, yeah, you're 2 issues in and your story is nowhere near complete. Could you just do the 3rd issue and I mean, maybe you're going to be hurriedly wrapping things up, but it would be nice to have some kind of closure. The frustrating things about creating your own comics is that things can end abruptly in the middle, and there can be oftentimes never any closure of any kind. It just will sit there leaving it hanging, and that's frustrating.
Yeah, people who always tell to young creators, people love to see creators who are able to finish their work.
Yeah.
Just don't show something that is not finished. Finish the work and then show it. That will open the doors for you.
Yeah. And also, just when you're starting out, it's fine to do a first issue that's self-contained. Just do that. People come in there like, oh, I got this great idea for a 50-part series. It's like, yeah, what happens when you can't do part 3? What happens when the sales aren't there? Are you going to just leave this whole big thing hanging? And it's great to have plans.
Mhm.
And I started my book off. I had plans, but my first issue was self-contained. My second issue had a beginning, middle, and end.
Mhm.
Third issue, it was a long time before I had real continued stories that were cliffhanger to be continued type stories.
Mhm.
And now at this point I'm far enough into it that I'm confident that I'm going to be able to do the next issue.
Mhm.
But even so, I'm sitting there going, all right, well, what happens if I get hit by a bus tomorrow? How much of this is just sitting there left hanging? And that does concern me.
Of course. Okay. Log Frank Howard says, hello, 100 shows. Yes, Eric is the special anniversary 100 edition of the show. Thank you. Tensio, silly question. Where can I find that amazing shirt Erin is wearing? I love it.
I got it in a store in San Francisco, and I don't remember the name of it. I'm sorry. But yeah, I have a couple cool Peanut shirts, and this is one of them.
Okay. Just look online. Maybe you'll find it.
Yeah, I'll circle back if I come up with that.
Okay. Miguel Ángel Montes de Oca, wow, what a guess. You have no limits. Okay, thank you, I guess.
All right.
Pedro de Mercader, hey Eric, delayed congratulations for the achievement in Savage Dragon. How do you keep the enthusiasm in a project with this longevity?
I think having it be real time definitely helped. That I had some place where I wanted to go, and it also makes it so that there was constant change, and that constant change made it so it always seemed like the book was being reinvented in a way. So it always kind of feels like it's a new book. There's always I'm always going someplace with it.
Sorry, my 6-year-old is closing the door, and I need to hear her. And I know when she closes the door, that means trouble. Sorry about that. You were saying, sorry.
I'm actually texting a friend who was with me when I bought this shirt. So if he gets back to me,
okay, maybe you will be lucky, Tensio, and we will find out about the T-shirt. So that you were saying that doing it in real time, that keeps you intrigued and interested about it in a way.
Yeah. Because there's constant new things that I have to be concerned with.
Mm-hmm.
So my buddy Craig says the name is 7 something, Super 7, something like that. It's a place on 16th in San Francisco. I can actually see if I can look at a map here.
Don't worry about it. You'll find it, Tensio. If you're not interested, you will find it.
The fans, man. I got to help these people out.
Okay, that's true. Log Frank Howard, a pleasure to meet you, Eric. How did you decide to leave Marvel for Image? What was who was the biggest influence in convincing you to leave? You were drawing a Spider-Man. How could you decide to leave, man?
I had wrapped up my run on Spider-Man, so I had actually kind of. It wasn't something where it was an ongoing concern for me at that point. I wanted to do Nova, and I had put in a pitch to do Nova. So that was the book that I really wanted to do, and they didn't give me that. So I was sitting there going, okay, well then this other opportunity presented itself, and so I decided, okay, I'll do that.
Mm-hmm.
Name of the place is Super 7 Clothing Store. And it is on 16th.
Now, thanks, Shio. I hope you're in San Francisco. If you're not, watch and try to find it online.
San Francisco. Super 7.
Yeah, now you know. Thank you so much, Eric, for taking the effort to do that. What was in your Pedro Mercader asks, what was in your opinion the most hard thing in managing, dealing, surviving all the egos involved between you image kids? When you started the company, did you ever imagine that it would what it has become?
You don't know going into it. I think it helped that all of us were doing our own individual books. And so it really was a situation where I could focus on that.
Mm-hmm.
So that became something where it wasn't something where I'm gonna be sitting there going, well, what's Jim Lee up to, and what's going on with Rob Liefeld and all that stuff. It was very much a situation where I was like, no, I'm doing my own thing, and I'm not gonna concern myself with what's going on over there. Just do the best work I can, and if there's places where these characters can connect. And I think, at least for me anyway, it was all about how, rather than working against these other guys and competing with these other guys, how can we compete with Marvel and DC? They're our competition, not each other. So that was more my focus is that. In terms of how the company came about in the first place, Rob Liefeld was more instrumental than anybody else in terms of that. And
he wants to say hello.
Hello. Hey, look at you.
I am fine.
Vale, venga, ya está.
Bye.
Sorry about that. She was at the door like this saying, Daddy, can I say hello? So you were saying, sorry.
It's Rob kind of wanted to test the waters. He was curious to know if the people who are buying his work over at Marvel, if they would buy his work at an independent thing. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, initially the idea was very small, and it was just, I want to see if I can do a book over there and see what would happen. He was friends with Dave Albrecht, who ran Malibu Comics. Mm-hmm. So initially, he had just taken out an ad in the Comics Buyer's Guide that just was for some book that he called Exterminators or something like that. It had a big X in it. That's all I know. And so Marvel kind of lost their shit about being in there, because it's like, these characters, they look like Rob Liefeld characters, and you've got an X in there. We're gonna sue you because this is too much like X-Force and blah blah blah. And these characters are clearly whatever. And he had just lost their mind. And what he didn't know was that many of those characters were actually pitched to DC. That he wanted to do a book. He wanted to do a Teen Titans book over at DC. He was going to call it Teen Titans. Mm-hmm. And it was going to star Speedy was the main character, and Harlequin was in there, and he had a new costume for various other existing DC characters. But since he had redesigned all of them, and DC ultimately passed on it, or it didn't end up happening, he suddenly had this group of characters that he could do as Youngblood, and then he had some other Youngblood characters that he had created when he was a much younger kid. So he had now these two teams of characters, and but I mean, initially that was the thought was, I'm going to do something over there. I'm going to create some new characters, Marvel freaked out, and then at that point it was blood in the water. We were like, oh, these guys are scared shitless that we can go someplace else, and they think that it's going to be successful. They fear that it's going to be successful, and that was really empowering.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely.
And he had asked at one point, me, Jim Valentino, and Rob had been out to dinner with Dave Albrecht, and Rob flat out asked him, so, hey, would you publish a book by us? He was like, I'd publish a book by any of you guys. All right. And so at that point, I think the three of us were like, okay, we're in. Once the ad came out and people freaked out about it, then suddenly Todd was like, oh, why didn't you tell me you guys wanted to do something like this? So suddenly it's like, oh, we got the Todd store on board. and then it became like, all right, so we got Rob, we got Todd, and once it became the four of us, then it was, once Todd was on board, he was actively recruiting, and so he knew that he was like, you got to get their golden boy, which is Jim Lee, because he is like, Jim Lee was the guy who was always towing the line and was kind of the safe guy. Like the rest of us were somewhat erratic.
Mm-hmm.
They could lose Todd at any moment. They could lose Rob at any moment because these guys would just go off.
Mm-hmm.
But Jim was always playing it really safe. And so his thought was, if we could get Jim away, that would be something, because that would be a major, like, everybody's leaving kind of thing. And then that would help us be able to recruit even more guys. So Todd put the sail on it, put the whatever it is. He pushed hard, and Jim came aboard, and Mark was right along. He was sitting next to him, so it was like, all right.
Wait, what? You're doing it? Okay, I'm in.
It's like, as long as you're putting in a sales pitch, I'm up for that. So, and then Wills came aboard, because there was another guy who was handy, and Jim felt would be a good guy, and he was. And then and then we just built from there. It was like, all right, well, who else is out there who could be convinced to come on board? And we tried with other people. There were various people who were approached who decided for one reason or another not to go. Mm-hmm. We had out, between the lot of us, there were many different people that we could reach out to, because a lot of people knew a lot of people. So I'm told that Jim Lee called John Byrne about doing something, and he politely declined. I know that Alan Davis was reached out to, and Alan's response was, I've seen these artist cooperatives before, and I know they're not going to last 6 months. So, all right. So there's that. And various other people were like, saw this as an excellent opportunity for them. Mm-hmm. Because suddenly there was this vacuum at Marvel where all these books suddenly just opened up. And so a lot of creators who had been banging at the door going, let me in, suddenly they had a job opening. It's like, we got Jim Lee on this book. We're not, you're not going to get on it unless some miracle happens. So it's like, well, here's your miracle. Will left, Mark left. I got guys to put on 2X books and on Wolverine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, for a lot of people, that was like manna from heaven.
Yeah, it was great. It was suddenly like, oh, finally, I'm putting on a big book. You know, suddenly Spider-Man's got all these guys on it that hadn't been able to get on there, and all the X books, and you know, whatever. Guardians of the Galaxy, we need a warm body. Who do you got?
Well, I'm happy to see, although I love Alan Davis, I'm happy to see he was wrong.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Plenty of people were predicting our demise very early on.
Mhm.
And, you know,
Yeah, that's like the Mark Twain quote, you know, the people saying I'm dead, blah blah blah. You know, like no, not really, I'm not. So,
but we were smart about it. We set it up so that there was no cross pollination in terms of the books. You know, I own my book completely. Nobody else has any financial stake in my book. And when we, as a company, we don't own any piece of anybody's rights. And that was super important to us going into it, that there would be nothing to fight about. So, and that was really part of the putting the whole thing together, was let's not have there be anything that we could possibly be bickering over.
mm-hmm.
You set all these pieces in place, you know, that if there are guest stars in each other's books, it's like, look, this guest star, this is in perpetuity. If this guest star can appear in this issue, I can reprint this issue until the end of time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's like, that's an important thing. I don't want to suddenly be able to be like, well, I can't reprint Savage Dragon #2 because the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle showed up. So I've got to be able to have those team ups, whatever they are, locked in. Like, this is baked in. This is forever.
Mm-hmm.
And the reciprocal part of that is true too. If they want to reprint their ends of those Savage Dragon crossovers, it's like, you guys own that stuff. You can reprint it forever. Do whatever you want.
Yeah. Francisco Sanchez, what time and for what reason did you decide to change the Savage Dragon series and moving on from being the typical image comic series as they were at the beginning to get some distance, even more from that style of comics?
There wasn't anything in particular. It was just a gradual thing, and I think it helped that Image in general was going away from superheroes, so it became less and less a case where there were all these characters that I could cross over with, and suddenly it was like, oh, you're on your own, kid. It's like, oh crap. I guess I don't. You know, if all that's left is, you know, Spawn and Savage Dragon as our two ongoing superhero books, and it's, well, there's not much there that I can play with. You know, maybe every few years we can have Spawn come wandering in, but you know, they're not going to be. It's not going to be a continuous team up between those two. So, you know, with all that other stuff kind of off the table, then it was like, I guess I need to make this book as self-contained as it can possibly be.
Yeah. Pedro de Mercader, is there a chance to see Image United finished?
Probably not. And the unfortunate thing is, due to whatever, and I have no idea why this happened, but Rob Liefeld had gotten into some situation where other people suddenly had control over his characters, and so he had taken on investors at one point in order to keep the machine going. And ultimately, at the end of the day, when it came to divvying things up, somebody else has ended up with the rights to both Youngblood and Supreme. And those are two very integral things in Image United. And so, you know, I mean, we could try and write around it and have it that suddenly those characters just aren't there anymore, and it's different Liefeld characters, but it's going to be kind of a mess. if we're going to do things that way.
Mm-hmm. Hello, Luis Pevidios. Hola. Erik Larsen, genius, hardworking man. Thank you for everything.
All right.
Paula Ventimiglia, congratulations on the 100 shows. Thank you, Paula. Also, I've just read the Savage Dragon issue 252, and
Okay.
I like the homages so much that you do to classic comic strips like Peanuts and Calvin and Hobbes.
That issue was a bear. That was a real challenge, because all those different art styles are not art styles that I draw in. So those are not things that come to me naturally. And so there was a lot of stuff in there where I'm sitting there going, well, how does Kathy draw hands? Because I've got a hand showing up. I have to reference every single thing in every single panel. And it's people have different approaches to things that I don't have, and there are all sorts of strips that you don't even think of them as having particular limitations. You go, hey, Charles Schultz, he draws really well. He must draw everything, and it's like, well, yeah, except he doesn't. He draws characters from the side, and he draws them from the front, and he does, a little bit of stuff, but you never see, complex angles on stuff. There's not much in the sense of three-dimensional stuff to it. And some of his characters, they don't really work when you go to move them. It's like the animators having to deal with the fact that Snoopy lies on a doghouse, but he's lying on the peak of a doghouse. It's like, that's not a comfortable way to lie down. And it only kind of works when you're seeing the doghouse from the side and he's lying on it, and your brain just goes, okay, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
When you're sitting there drawing stuff, it's like, oh, there's all these limitations that I didn't realize were there before. I can't do this kind of a shot anymore because it's off the table. That's not something that he does.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some real ones where it's like Foxtrot. Not only is the art super limited, but these characters they don't move in a way that makes any sense. Their noses have a completely different shape from the front and from the side. It's like it's a completely different nose. It's not the same thing at all. What the hell am I doing? Kathy draws characters from the front or characters from the exact back. So it's like I've got to compose all my panels so that characters are just straight on all the time. How am I having characters talk with each other and facing the camera constantly? And then it's what does everything in a kitchen look like? What is all with each strip, there was all these limitations of you can't do this, you can't do that. Your approach has got to be different here and different there. Just there's so many things and so many art style things that are different. And then I've got Ferran Delgado who's lettering it. He's sitting there going, okay, which strip are we doing here, and what font am I using, and how am I doing this, and what's my approach, and so I'm sending him all these copies of all these strips, and just figuring out which strips to do was a long, involved process that meant reading, thousands of strips, just coming up with, okay, well, which strips work and which don't. I at one point was thinking, oh, I'll do Garfield, but Garfield doesn't work unless you've got a cat in it. Otherwise, the style isn't. Some of the strips really depend on key characters, key locations, and once you take those off the table, it suddenly doesn't work anymore. It's like, oh, I'm emulating Hal Foster and doing a Prince Valiant. It's like, well, it's not in medieval times, and so you're going to lose all of that stuff, all that trait, the way that this strip looks is all off the table. So what sells it as a Prince Valiant strip now? It's just a realistically drawn strip.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to be giving somebody that dopey haircut so you can have somebody with that? How are you going to, how does this really work as a parody of that? And I wanted all the strips to seem kind of like they're faithful to the original strip and faithful to the Savage Dragon world, so that characters weren't acting wildly out of character, and doing things that they wouldn't do to each other. And I didn't want to just create a lot of new one-off characters too. Mm-hmm. I had considered I'll have them get a cat so they can do the Garfield thing, and then I'll have the daughter the youngest daughter has electrical powers. I'll just have her fry the cat in the last panel, and that's the end of the cat. I don't have to deal with the cat anymore. And it's like, okay, well that's a possibility, and it shows her as being dangerous, and it shows her mom freaking out or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I could do that, and then other strips is like, this won't work because of this. This needs that. I really love. There's a strip called Tiger that I really love, but it's like a kid with a baseball cap pulled over his head is like the main character in that strip, and I'm sitting there going, I got 4 kids in my strip that all have fins on their heads, which means they can't wear hats.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm omitting that prop, does this read as a takeoff on Tiger anymore? And it's like, not really.
Mm-hmm.
Can I do a Dennis the Menace riff if kids aren't able to do, annoy a neighbor? How much of this requires certain things that are in that strip to work? So there's, a lot of making lists of different strips, trying out different strips. There were some that were started that were abandoned. Some I got farther along than others, whereas in one case I did a full strip and then ultimately decided I can't use this because this kid's too close to home with whatever. So it's like, I got to change this to another strip entirely just because I don't want to be pissing people off. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to be somewhat conscientious about different things. So
the learning experience was worth those tons of erasers you needed to use.
I don't know about the learning experience. It's one of many challenges that I've done for myself, and I'm glad that I did it. I'm happy to have done it. But I'm not sitting here at the end of the day going, and I'm going to use this thing that I got from this one strip from here on out, and I'm going to have this new tool in my tool belt. Mostly I was learning was that several of the artists that I was emulating are severely limited in the scope of what they're able to do in a comic strip.
Mm-hmm.
But there's just being able to set up jokes in those kind of ways, that kind of format, having there be the first 2 toss-away panels with something that was in some of the strips but not in some of the others. I really played fast and loose with when I chose different strips. Like I wanted Doonesbury from a period when Doonesbury was really actively kind of repeating the same kind of panel again and again, mm-hmm. which is something that I really think of as kind of quintessential Doonesbury. Is, in later strips, they're moving around panel angles and doing different shots and trying different approaches and stuff like that. And I didn't want that. I wanted the more limited stage, Doonesbury because it just feels like Doonesbury to me.
Yeah.
And also, I liked the old Doonesbury logo, so it's like, all right, I want this approach. With Popeye, I was going back to the old Thimble Theater stuff, so that was really going back to the 1930s with that. But there's numerous other strips where I was like, I should do a Gasoline Alley. But then it was like, the problem with doing Gasoline Alley is style-wise, it's not actually that dissimilar from Thimble Theater and what Cigar is doing on that. So what I had a lot of things going into it. I wanted every time that you turn the page for there to be a strong stylistic difference from the previous strip, so that it was definitely like, okay, this is something else. I tried not to repeat characters as much as humanly possible, so I restricted that. There was one really early on because I started with Family Circus and then followed up with Peanuts. So it's like, well, I can't not do this because it's got all the kids that were in the previous page. But when I flip the page from that, then it's like, all right, we're not dealing with any of those characters now. We're moving on to different characters. So I tried to have it so that there was, different characters, different locations, different styles as much as possible, and as many different formats and approaches as I could find, so that it wasn't too repetitious in terms of style.
Love from Howard, how did you manage to have so many and so varied how many crossovers that were so different among themselves? Superman, Teenage Ninja Turtles, etc. That happening in the 90s had any emphasis because crossovers were much more usual then?
Yeah. I mean, I just wanted to do it. And I think part of that was giving it there's something about stepping up onto a bigger stage in a way, where it's like, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is a big established property. And to do a crossover with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was to go, these characters are now on a similar stage with one another. And then, having the character team up with Superman was like, that was something I did as a kid. When I was a little kid, I would have Savage Dragon team up with Superman. And in fact, I had done a drawing at one point because I was going to do my own Treasury Edition when I was a kid, because that's when all this team ups would always be in these Treasury Edition formats. So I'd taken a Superman, and I was like, I'm going to draw this Superman teaming up with Savage Dragon. And so I had drawn this cover when I was a kid, but I didn't have any other big paper. So all I did was this one cover. So I had this one drawing that ended up being at my grandparents' house. So I had given it to my grandparents. So years later, that came back to me, and I had this original again. And then I'd done this real team up with Superman and Dragon. And then I got that original back because, that was a painted cover. So I had two of these images. One is the fan dreaming of having his character meet Superman, and the other is the professional with his character meeting Superman.
No, wow.
To be able to take both of those and have them framed and be like, hey, look, Ma, I made it.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Why, of those crossovers, why martial law? Because martial law wasn't a character. I love martial law. I love Pat. I love Kevin. But that wasn't really a well-known character in the US, even if, it was done by Epic and all that later. That he wasn't really a big name. Although if you are Garth Ennis, he will tell you, and you can see martial law was the primary influence for him, as you can see in his later work. But why martial law?
My memory of that was that they asked me, and I said, sure.
Okay.
It was as simple as that. It wasn't a crossover that I was hugely involved with, and it was set in some kind of a weird future. So I'd be like, hey, do whatever the hell you want to, man. Just spell my name right.
Okay. Bada, 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 bada. Where did Francisco Sanchez, hello, ask, where did you get the influences to do your version of Spider-Man? I'm asking above all about the gestures, the eyes of the mask, the gestures in the eyes of the mask.
Michael Golden was doing that there was a Marvel fanfare that both me and Todd McFarlane ripped off. And really, all the cool Spider-Man stuff you think of as Spider-Man that both Todd and I did, we're both leaning hard on Michael Golden.
That was the Savage Land?
Huh?
It was the story in the Savage Land? In the Savage Land?
There was two. There was the two-parter in the Savage Land, and there was one part later on where Spider-Man met the Hulk.
Okay.
And in both of those, he has the spaghetti webbing, and he also was doing a little bit of stuff with the eyes. He wasn't going crazy the way I did, but he was doing a little bit of action with the eyes. And also in the Spider-Man animation, they would have his eyes be able to move a little bit, and because otherwise they wouldn't be able to show any kind of expression. So that was their workaround. So I just did it, and it was something that Todd told me later that he wanted to do it, and they wouldn't let him, and so he didn't. But I just did it, and I guess the editor was like, whatever.
I'm going to stop saying no to this. They're going to do it sooner or later anyway.
So, but one of the things I wanted to do is and I did do, was give him a chest symbol that was more stable and steady and was more iconic. That was something that I really wanted to do. And other artists had him with just a fat spider with all 8 arms pointing down. And when I came on, I was like, I'm going to have 4 of them pointing down and 4 of them pointing up, and give it a definite, round shape.
Yeah. So
that was something that I really wanted. As I want to have something that I can be like, I'm going to give him this. I'm going to make sure to put webbing under his arms, and I'm going to have it actually be webbing that's emanating from his underarms. There was a lot of little things and I think each of us kind of came on here going, I want to put my stamp on this character as much as I can. At the same time, you were aware that this character's been in comic books forever, and so here are the rules of drawing Peter Parker. You don't put a lot of rendering on his cheeks. His cheeks they always keep his cheeks kind of clean and open, so there's not a lot of cross hatching or whatever on his cheeks. Mary Jane, she's got dimples, she's got a cleft in her chin, she's got arched eyebrows. And then, we started monkeying around with her hair and making her hair all kind of craziness. But at least he was like, she's got to have the dimples, she's got to have the cleft, she's got to have those arched eyebrows. Otherwise, it doesn't look like Mary Jane.
Yeah.
And,
so even with crazy hair and all that, it just had to feel like Mary Jane for you guys.
Yes, it's got to feel like she's Mary Jane, and that's something that more recently artists aren't doing that as much. I've seen a few people who don't give her any of the dimples, any of the cleft, any of the anything, and I just look at it and go, I don't even know that this is Mary Jane. You have to have people identify her in the dialogue of this comic for me to even know who it is. It just looks like random redhead.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I've noticed the cleft, disappearing more often than not, and the dimples go. Yeah,
it's like no, you need that.
Yeah. Let me see. Marcelo Ramos, I am late. Have you already talked about the Einstein's theory of relativity? Yes, Marcelo.
Yeah.
We're late.
And, Einstein, yeah.
Love from Howard. Question from Felipe Gonzalez. After 30 years on Image, do you think you have accomplished your goals as a creator? Is Image today the company you wanted it to be?
I wanted there to be more of a shared universe than there is. I kind of would like there to be. I like having there be a playground that we can all play in and characters going back and forth. So I do miss that aspect of it. So to that degree, there's a bit of it that I'm kind of annoyed at. That is like, I wanted this, but in terms of having there be a place where creators can do whatever the hell they want to, yes, we've been able to do that, and that's been awesome. And it's one of those things that early on, where people were criticizing Image for, hey, all you're doing is superheroes. We've already got plenty of superhero comics, and now you can kind of go, yeah, now you got everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of been an interesting thing is that at this point, Image doesn't do a lot of superheroes, and kind of all the other stuff, we've had a fair amount of success with all these other kind of stories, and it's been interesting that Marvel and DC have had almost no luck expanding beyond superheroes, where we've been able to kind of do anything and have it be hugely successful. It's like, oh, we can do zombie books and we can do all this crazy stuff where people can do whatever, and it's been successful, and that's been super gratifying that we can expand the market.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, well, I think that killing Epic and killing Vertigo didn't help either.
Yeah.
So that was their venue, and they don't have it anymore. So let me see. Eric, is there a reason for the noticeable lack of collected editions for Savage Dragon? I would really love to buy a bunch of big omnibus editions for the full Savage Dragon collection.
Well, there is a reason, and the reason is a lot of those color files were sent off to other countries so that they could be reprinted, and they were never sent back. So in a lot of cases, we don't have the color files for early issues anymore.
Ouch.
So it would be really expensive to recolor a lot of those comics. Huge expense. And the colors aren't going to be the comics that saw print. There's no way to match those things. And so, we're sitting there looking at going, okay, what are the possible numbers? How well could this sell? Is this even feasible in any way? And I don't have an answer to that. So that's the main reason is it's just we don't have the material. And we can scan in and clean up comics, but those are not going to be that pretty.
Yeah.
And in an omnibus in a big expensive book like that, you're going to have those ugly books. I've got the black and white Savage Dragon Archives book, and at this point, volume 10 of that is going to be coming out in December. So I've got all the first 250 issues will all be collected in these books. They're available. You can read them in that form. We've been doing smaller trades that collect 6-issue chunks, but in terms of doing omnibuses, it's a lot of issues to collect. And if we're doing, and some of those books can be really unwieldy if you put too many issues into it.
Mm-hmm.
I've got some Spider-Man books that have got 40 comics in them, and it's like, those things are hard to read.
Yeah.
And how many issues can you put in where until it becomes unusable? And so it's like, okay, if I'm doing 25 issue chunks, understand that's 10 omnibuses right now.
Yeah.
And that's a lot. And 25 issues in a big book like that, that's a big, heavy book to read. How comprehensible is that going to be? I mean, maybe, but again, my concern would be issue 1 it'll do decent. Issue 2 will do considerably less, and then issue 3 is not worth publishing.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're going to end up with it being not comprehensive, and we're not going to be able to get the full scope and the full run of the book if we're doing, books that cost too much. So I don't know. It's a complicated thing, and if and there are people who like to read the book in trade form. There are people who are every 6 months like getting a nice little trade that collects 6 issues. I know there are people who get it that way, and those have been coming out on a fairly regular clip. Whether or not it's suddenly like, oh, we'll support this third format too. It's like, holy crap, man! I don't know.
Yeah, there's always I can understand your worry that you people gets excited about having the full run in omnibus and then not being able to continue after issue 3, as you just said, as the volume 3, and disappointing people because it's this something that you start that you can finish, right?
Yeah, and you want that. You want to be able to have it be that it's like, here's all of it.
Mm-hmm.
And people will point to, well, they're able to do that with The Walking Dead. But you go, yeah, but Walking Dead sells a lot more units than Savage Dragon does.
Mm-hmm.
And also Walking Dead did end, and I've got, I don't know how many more issues than Walking Dead, but it's probably close to 100 more at this point.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yes, absolutely. Francisco Sanchez asks, why did you decide to redo issue 13 of Savage Dragon on the X month?
I wanted my run complete. I just wanted to be able to go, I did 100 consecutive issues, I did 12 consecutive issues, and then I did a bunch more consecutive issues. And also just story-wise, there ended up being this gap where I was like, I kind of need to inform people about this and this. So I saw that there was a possibility of a story there. And it's like, I can fill this gap and I can make the introduction to these various characters. So let me just do that.
Mm-hmm. It's going to be 2 hours already, and you need to come back to your life probably. So just one last question, and I'll let you go if you're fine with it. Is there anything that in your mind, in your heart of hearts, as they say, you're telling, there's a story that I haven't told yet that that has been nagging you, and you're saying, I'm going to tell this story before I retire or die or whatever? It's something that is always been with you, you haven't been able to tell, but sooner or later you're going to.
And at this point, I've kind of burned through all my material and I'm running on fumes. I tend to want to get those stories out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sitting there going, oh, I never got to tell that one. I'm kind of glad in a way that I was forced to tell Dragon's Origin, because that would have been one of those stories like, oh, I actually have a story for that. But I was kind of forced to do it because of the Image anniversary book that we had done. And I was like, all right, I've been doing my book the whole time, so coming back and doing my character again isn't going to be a treat. So I need to come up with something.
Mm-hmm.
trying to think if there's anything. I mean, any other characters I've done.
That's what I meant to. Not even with Savage Dragon, which is your life's work, but even
there are being a lot of other things. I mean, there are like Hulk stories that I wanted to tell, but it's like I can't tell Hulk stories in Savage Dragon. So I had a bunch of stuff that I wanted to do on the Incredible Hulk, and at one point I had written up proposals a couple times when various writers were leaving of things I wanted to do. So it's like, will I actually ever get to do those?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not. Maybe not. I have a Batman story that kind of works as a Batman story, but not as anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not actually sure that I'm capable of writing it, but it's a cool idea. But it's like maybe that'll be one where I'll team up with another writer and go like, okay, I'm just going to draw this thing, and you have to put in all the dialogue because I'm not gonna dialogue Batman.
Yeah, this is my idea. You write it, then I'll draw it.
I mean, that's a case where I could do it super. I mean, pretty much Stan and Jack style, where Jack would just draw a story and then put liner notes and say, okay, Stan, here you go. But that was just a real basic visceral idea for a Batman story. And it's like, all right, I've got that. I've got a Hulk thing. In terms of create our own stuff, if I got an idea for something, I just do it. I did a one-off character called Jack Champion that was in a book called Giant Size Kung Fu Bible Stories. We did this Treasury Edition size book. And it's like, I'd like to do more with that character, and I have stories with that guy.
Mm-hmm.
Haven't got around to yet. I bought the character Ant from Mario Gully, so I've got that character. I've used her a couple times in various issues of Savage Dragon, but I want to do some solo adventures of that character. I haven't had time to fully commit to doing more of that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's definitely stuff I want to get to. And just in Savage Dragon, it's like I want the kids to grow up. I want to be telling adventures of them as teenagers and as young adults, and,
mm-hmm.
and to be able to pay that off. And I really like the idea that this book can be generational in that way.
Mm-hmm.
You can have somebody, hey, it's the grandpa of the kid, and we just have that going on.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's been the fun part of Savage Dragon, is just playing out that experiment. There was always that question, well, how come Marvel and DC, how come they don't age their characters? Like, well, they can't, because successive creators aren't going to create something that's as cool as Batman and Superman.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not going to happen. But, I'm crazy enough that I could do this on my own and try this out by myself, and I'm going to create new villains. That's not going to be a problem. So, hey, let's try this out. Let's see if this works. Could somebody do this, and could it be successful, and do these kinds of stories work?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they seem a little dumb if you think about them too much, where you just go, wait a minute, so that villain has been spending 6 months and they haven't got to execute their plan yet? That seems a little crazy that they're just sitting there with their arms behind their back looking out a window for that long.
Like,
It's like, but in ordinary comics, you can do that with the Kingpin and have him just be scheming behind the scenes, building up to his great big plan. But if this is taking place during real time,
yeah,
you can't have somebody get on a bus in one issue and then get there 2 issues later, because how long is that bus ride? I mean, Greyhounds are slow, but for crying out loud, that's ridiculous.
How they crossing the whole continent. And the last question is, do you know the ending for Savage Dragon, or
No.
you haven't ever thought about the ending and you're just going along for the ride?
There is no ending. There is no. The ending is I die. That's the ending.
Okay, fair enough.
There's no wrapping it up, because I've had several people go, you should do the last issue ahead of time, and then when you die they can just print your last issue, and that'll be this nice issue that ties everything up. But it's like, that sounds awesome for you, but it sounds hellish for me, because I don't know when that issue would take place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Am I writing an issue that takes place 30 years from now, or am I writing an issue that takes place 5 years from now?
Absolutely. If
So
you're doing it in real time, it's almost impossible to know.
Yeah, there's no fix, because it's like I could be drawing along and suddenly get to that point. Plus, it would really tie me up in terms of all the other characters that are alive in that story. It's like, oh, so I can't impulsively kill any of those characters off now? Well, that sucks. Because I do that constantly, where I'm just like, I don't like him anymore. He's gone. Like, oh crap! I forgot that he was in a scene later on. I did a story in Savage Dragon early on where he met Wildstar, and it was a flash forward with a guy who looks like Dragon in a spacesuit, and Wildstar was looking at his hands, and he was an old man. And a few issues later, Malcolm was born, and so then it became, oh, is that Malcolm? Is that a later version of Malcolm? Or is that what you're building towards? And that thing hung over me for like 15, 16 years of, eventually I've got to pay this scene off. Eventually I'm going to get there. And I did get there, but once I got there, I was like, yeah, I'm never doing this again.
One time was enough.
Yeah. And just thinking about writing and laughing.
Sometimes it just doesn't. I cannot switch it on the. Sorry, guys, YouTube guys. I was telling Eric. Sometimes you can be 2 hours or 3 hours and non-stop, and sometimes they just cut you like every hour, and there's no way you can change the settings. It's a pain in the ass. So you were saying that that one time doing that was enough, and
just doing things that take place in the future, and then having to tie back in with them. It's like, Jesus, this is a nightmare, man. How do we deal with this stuff?
Anyway, so I wanted to cut right before YouTube cut us, but they got to me before I was able to do it. So thank you so much, Eric, for being here. Because I want to say proper goodbye to you after I cut the live feed. But to all of you, thank you for being here. Wear your mask. Be good people. Have a nice weekend. And on Monday with us, I told you that I didn't know if I was going to go past 100. Yes, I am masochistic, so I'm going to go past 100. Monday, we have Mike Carey with us. See you all. Thank you. Have a nice weekend.